Today, Atheists United, we are celebrating Black History Month. To read several selections from historical Black authors, we've assembled a group of 4 talented readers from AU ranks. First, Kiana Watkins, come on up. Next, Roberta West. And Richard McNally. Plus a special celebrity guest reader, actor, comedian, Steve Hill.
I'm going to read a letter written by a man named Jordan Anderson. He was born in slavery, somewhere around 1825. When he was 7 or 8, he was sold to General Paulding Anderson in Tennessee, and subsequently passed on to the general's son. In 1848, Jordan married Amanda McGregor, known as Mandy. They eventually had 11 children. In 1864, Jordan and his family, it was during the Civil War, were freed by Union soldiers. They eventually moved to Ohio, where they were able to establish decent lives as free people. The letter I'm going to read was written immediately after the Civil War. You see, after the war, Colonel Anderson's plantation in Tennessee was in disarray. Harvest season was approaching, with nobody to bring in the crops. So Colonel Anderson wrote to Jordan, who, as I said, was now a free man, and he asked Jordan to return to the plantation. Here, then, is Jordan's response. Dayton, Ohio, August 7th, 1865. To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Springs, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter and was glad to find you had not forgotten me, and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anybody else can. I have often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you before this. I suppose they never heard about you going to Colonel Martin's to kill the Union soldier that was left behind by his company in the stable. Although you shot at me twice before I left you, I did not want to hear of you being hurt, and I'm glad you're still living. It would do me good to go back to the dear old home again and see Miss Mary, Miss Martha, Allen, Esther, Green, and Lee. Give my love to them all and tell them I hope we will meet in the better world, if not in this. I would have gone back to see you all after I was freed, when I was working in the Nashville hospital, but one of the neighbors said you intended to shoot me if you ever got a chance. I want you to know particularly what the good chance is that you propose to give me. I'm doing tolerably well here. I get $25 a month with victuals and clothing, have a comfortable home for Mandy. The folks call her Mrs. Anderson. And the children, Millie, Jane, and Grundy, go to school and are learning well. We are kindly treated. Sometimes we hear others saying, them colored people were slaves down in Tennessee. The children feel hurt when they hear such remarks. But I tell them it was no disgrace in Tennessee to belong to Colonel Anderson. Many darkies would have been so proud, as I used to be, to call you master. Now, if you will write and say what the wages you will give us, well, I will be better able to decide whether it would be to my advantage to move back again. As to my freedom, which you say I can have, well, there's nothing to be gained on that score. As I got my papers in 1864 from the Provost Marshal General of the Department in Nashville, Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send us our wages for the time we served you. This will make us forget and forgive old scores and rely on your justice and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 32 years, and Manda for 20 years. At $25 a month for me and $2 a week for Mandy, our earnings should amount to $11,680. Add to this the interest for the time our wages have been kept back, and deduct what you paid for us for our clothing and 3 doctor's visits and pull in a tooth for Mandy, and the balance will show what we are in justice entitled to. Please send the money to Adams Express in care of V. Winters, Esquire, Dayton, Ohio. If you fail to pay us for our labors, our faithful labors in the past, we can have little faith in your promises in the future. We trust the good Maker has opened your eyes to the wrongs which you and your fathers have done to me and my fathers, in making us toil for you for generations without recompense. Here I draw my wages every Saturday night, but in Tennessee there never was any payday for the Negroes any more than for the horses or the cows. Surely there will be a day of reckoning for those who defraud the laborer of his hire. In answering this letter, please state if there will be any safety for Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good-looking girls. You know how it was with poor Matilda and Catherine. I would rather stay here and starve or die, if it come to that, than have my girls brought up to shame by the violence and wickedness of their young masters. You will also please state if there have been any schools opened for the colored children in your neighborhood. The great desire of my life now is to give my children an education and have them form virtuous habits. Oh, and say howdy to George Carter and thank him for taking the pistol from you when you were trying to shoot me. Yours most sincerely, Jordan Anderson.
Frederick Douglass, born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, lived from around February 1818 to February 20th, 1895, 77 years. He was the best known African-American social reformer, orator, writer, and statesman of the 1800s. After escaping from slavery in 1838 and fleeing to England, fearful of possible re-enslavement, he eventually bought his own freedom and returned to America as a free man in 1847. He became a leader of the abolitionist movement, gaining note for his dazzling oratory and incisive anti-slavery writing. He stood as a living counterexample to slaveholders' arguments that slaves lacked the intellectual capacity to function as independent American citizens. Many Northerners found it hard to believe that such a great orator had been a slave. Douglass wrote several autobiographies. The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass was first published in 1881 and revised in 1892, 3 years before his death. He also actively supported women's suffrage and held several public offices. A firm believer in the equality of all people, whether black, female, Native American, or recent immigrant, Douglass famously said, "I would unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong. Frederick Douglass settled in Rochester, New York, where he published the North Star, an abolitionist newspaper. He directed the local Underground Railroad, which smuggled escaped slaves into Canada, and he worked to end racial segregation in Rochester's public schools. In 1852, the leading citizens of Rochester asked Douglass to give a speech as part of their 4th of July celebration. Douglass accepted their invitation. In his speech, however, Douglass delivered a scathing attack on the hypocrisy of a nation celebrating freedom and independence with speeches, parades, and platitudes, while within its borders, nearly 4 million human beings were being kept as slaves. Here's some excerpts of that speech. Fellow citizens, pardon me and allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence? I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilant joys that reach them. If I do not remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. My subject then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view, standing here making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to us than on the 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of this nation seems equally ludicrous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly bends herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery. the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command. But I fancy I hear some in my audience say it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public. Mind, would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your just cause could be made more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of the country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of those same crimes will subject a white man to the same punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding under severe fines and penalties the teaching of the slave to read and write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing. Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that we are engaged in all the enterprises common to other men, living in families as husbands, wives, and children. Yet we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven who does not know that slavery is wrong. What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system this marked started with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That which is inhuman cannot be divine. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today point out a fiery stream of biting ridicule blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the white wind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The prosperity of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy alliance, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mock. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a man in the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go search where you will. Roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world and lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation. You will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without rival. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kiana Watkins, and I will be reading from August Wilson. August Wilson was a playwright from the 20th century. He wrote a lot about what it was like to be black in America. He was pretty much the Shakespeare, a modern Shakespeare, for those who were pretty much, yeah. I'm going to be reading from a play called Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and this is kind of based off of real life of a man named Joe Turney who would pick up men off of the street who were free black men and would kind of find them and accuse them of crimes that weren't necessarily true and put them into slavery for the maximum years that they could be put into slavery, which was 7. This was during the time where slavery was halfway abolished, but only a punishment. They tell me Joe Turner's come and gone. Oh, Lordy. They tell me Joe Turner's come and gone. Oh, Lordy, got my man and gone. Come with 40 links of chain. Whoa, Lordy. You a farming man, Harold Loomis? You look like you done some farming. Same as everybody. I done farming, yeah. I used to work at farming. Pick some cotton. Reckon everybody done pick some cotton. Mr. Loomis done pick some cotton, ain't ya? Harold Loomis, you done picked a bunch of cotton. How you know so much about me? How you know what I done? How much cotton I picked? I can tell from looking at you. My daddy taught me how to do that. Say when you look at a fella, if you taught yourself to look for it, you can see his song written on him. Tell you what kind of man he is in the world. Now I look at you, Mr. Loomis, and see you a man who done forgot his song, forgot how to sing it. A fella that forget that, and he forget who he is, forget how he's supposed to mark down in life. And I used to travel all up and down this road and that, looking here and there, searching, just like you. Mr. Loomis, I didn't know what I was searching for. The only thing I knew was something was keeping me dissatisfied. Something was making my heart, wasn't making my heart smooth and easy. Then one day my daddy gave me a song. That song had a weight to it, was hard to handle. That song was hard to carry. I fought against it. Didn't want to accept that song. I tried to find my daddy to give him back the song. But I found out it wasn't his song. It was my song. It had come from way deep inside me. I looked long back in my memory and gathered up pieces and snatched of things to make that song. I was making it up out of myself. And that song helped me on the road. Made it smooth to where my footsteps didn't bite back at me. All that time, the song getting bigger and bigger. That song growing with each step on the road. It got so big all of the time. Myself up in the making of that song. Then I was in the song, in the search of itself. That song rattling in my throat. And I'm looking for it. See, Mr. Loomis, when a man forgets his song, he goes off in search of it, till he finds out he's got it with him all the time. That's why I can tell you one of Joe Turner's niggas, 'cause you forgot how to sing your song. You lie. How can you see that? I got a mark on me. Joe Turner done marked on me. Where can you see it? You telling me I'm a marked man? What kind of mark you got on you? They tell me Joe Turner come and gone. Oh, Lordy, tell me Joe Turner come and gone. Oh, Lord, got my man and gone. An whole mess of men he catched. Just go out hunting regular like you go out hunting possum. He catch you and go home to his wife and family. Ain't thought about you going home to yours. Joe Turner catched me when my little girl was just born. Wasn't nothing but a little baby sucking on her mama's titty when he catched me. Joe Turner catched me in 1901. Kept me 7 years until 1908. Kept everybody 7 years. He'd go out hunting and bring back 40 men at a time and keep them 7 years. I was walking down this road, this little town outside of Memphis. Come up, these fellows gambling. I was a deacon in the Abundant Life Church. I stopped to preach to these fellows to see if maybe I could turn some of them from their sinning. When Joe Turner, brother of the government of the great sovereign state of Tennessee, swooped down on us and grabbed everybody there, kept us all 7 years. My wife Martha gone from me after Joe Turner catched me. Got out from under Joe Turner on his birthday. Me and 40 other men put in our 7 years, and he let us go on his birthday. I made it back to Henry Thompson's place where me and Martha was sharecropping. Martha's gone. She taken my little girl and left her with the mama, took off north. We've been looking for her ever since. That's been going on for 4 years. Now we've been looking. That's the only thing I know to do. I just want to see a face so I can give me a starting place in the world. The world got to start somewhere. That's what I've been looking for. I've been wandering a long time in someone else's world. When I find my wife, that be the making of my own. Joe Turner tell you why he caught you? You ever asked him that? I ain't never seen Joe Turner. Seen him to where I could touch him. I asked one of them fellows one time why he catch niggas. Asked him what I got he want. Why don't he keep on to himself? Why you gotta catch me going down the road by my lonesome? He told me I was worthless. Worthless is something you throw away. Worthless is something you don't bother with. I ain't see him throw me away. Wouldn't even let me stay away when I was by my lonesome. I ain't tried to catch him when he was going down the road. So I must got something he want. What I got. I can look at him and see where he big and strong enough to do his own work. So it can't be that. He must be want something he ain't got. Oh, child. That ain't hard to find out. Just figure. What he wanted was your song. He wanted that song to be his. He thought by catching you, he could learn that song. Every nigga he catch, he's looking for the one he can learn that song from. Now he's got you bound up to where you can't sing your own song. Couldn't sing it them 7 years because you was afraid he would snatch it from up under you. But you still got it. Just forgot how to sing it. I know who you are. You one of them Bones people. They tell me Joe Turner's come and gone. Oh, Lordy, got my main and gone. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Hill. I will be reading a chapter from a dear friend of mine book. The author's name is Jeremiah Kamara. He's also the author of the book Holy Lockdown, and he's also a filmmaker out of Atlanta, Georgia. And the film is Contradiction, A Question of Faith, which is now available online. This chapter has special significance and meaning to me because when you're dealing with a group of people that are extremely difficult to reach, you do it by any means necessary, whether it's making a film, writing a book, or even telling comedy. However you can reach them, you reach them. Here's the chapter. I hope you enjoy it. Superstition. A belief which leaves no place for doubt is no belief. It is superstition. Jose Bergaman. We are trapped in an antiquated web of mythology and priestly sanctioned rules. Our Sunday mornings are too often full of pep rally promises and crystal ball predictions. The ministry of waiting on miracles obstructs us from using pragmatic solutions to solve our issues. The church is helping to keep us in the dark ages. The outlandish stories we read in the Bible were made up by men with questionable intentions. These stories were used and useful during a time when significant populations were in the elementary stages of understanding the world around them. And what could not be explained scientifically was regulated to supernaturalism and superstition. Superstition and religion are two sides of the same coin. Neither is based on reason or knowledge, and both can be described as irrational fears of what is unknown or mysterious. Clearly, superstition and religion are blindly accepted beliefs or notions. The majority of blacks were probably raised in households intolerant of religious skepticism and admonished whenever they attempted to ask questions concerning their parents' beliefs. Most were told, never question God. Some of us were even struck if we got too far out of line. There were certain things one just could not say or do. What is not quite obvious in the fine line between religion and superstition, I've heard churchgoers claim that bad things begin to happen to them once they stop going to church. This type of reasoning is nothing more than superstition. Superstitions have origins similar to religion. Every function of the universe was thought to have a divine reason or purpose attached to it. Primitive people were limited in their scientific understanding of the natural world. Therefore, natural phenomenon could not be explained through knowledge of the material properties at hand. Superstition came as a result of primitive people attributing events to seemingly related events that in reality had nothing to do with each other. It was a misrepresentation of cause and effect. Similarly, in religion, when something good happens, it is attributed to God, and when something bad happens, it is attributed to evil or the devil. Religion puts names in the good and bad, ebb and flow, ups and downs, and the negative and positives of life. Take earthquakes and hurricanes, for example. These two natural phenomena are not conscious of who they are affecting. They are natural earthly functions. When Hurricane Katrina hit the city of New Orleans and places along the Gulf Coast, many believers attributed this natural occurrence to the devil. But why would a loving, omnipotent God allow his weaker nemesis, the devil, to punish a large percentage of people who are already impoverished. What did they do to deserve such a catastrophe? Many blame the awful crime and God-forbidden sinfulness of the citizens of New Orleans. If the so-called wicked actions of people are responsible for ushering in natural disasters, then ancient Rome, ancient Greece, Washington, D.C., and Miami would have perished long ago. And didn't expect that here, but okay. Many blame the awful crimes for God-forbidding sinfulness of the citizens of New Orleans. Okay, I already read that. Religious superstitious people are also attributed to the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, which measured 7.0 on the Richter scale, to the practicing of heathen or voodoo religion. Haitian people have much difference for religion, but nevertheless, the earthquake killed thousands of people. Televangelist Pat Robertson said the Haitian people are cursed because they made a pact with the devil, telling him that they would bow down and worship him if he released them from French rule. Religion's job is to give God all the credit, but never give this same God any blame. Such an attribution is comparable to parents who are always too willing to take credit for their child's success, but never their failures. Many of us finding out that it is pretty ridiculous to believe in such superstitious nonsense, someday we will also discover the same about biblical nonsense. Where did these superstitions come from anyway? No one can exactly pinpoint the answer, but we do know that these superstitions do not appeal to anything logical or reasonable. Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Yeah, I don't read the Bible ever. And I'm proud to say that, I really am. Are filled with weird superstitions and rules. From the standpoint of many believers, these odd laws are now invalid because they no longer apply. But are these laws the word of God or not? If one's word is their bond, how then can their bond become obsolete? Where does the Bible state that these laws are defunct? How do we conveniently pick and choose what laws to obey or disregard? One afternoon over lunch, my mother was describing to me some of the many superstitions my grandmother had. One of the strangest being that no woman could ever be the first person to enter the house on Monday morning. As my mother went through her mother's list of weird beliefs, I thought more about the aspect of religion. Religion is basically priestly sanctioned superstition. Random House Dictionary defines superstition as a belief or notion not based on reason or knowledge in or of the omnibus significance of any particular thing, circumstance, occurrence, proceeding, or the like. Any irrational fear of what is unknown or mysterious. Any blindly accepted belief or notion. That to me describes religion perfectly. We can even compare many non-biblical superstitions with many religious laws as outlined in this holy instruction manual. We consider the Word of God. Superstitions. We're all familiar with these. Friday the 13th is an unlucky day. Walking under a ladder brings bad luck. If a black cat crosses your path, you will have bad luck. Breaking a mirror will bring 7 years bad luck. Opening an umbrella in the house brings bad luck. At the end of a rainbow is a pot of gold. An itchy palm means money will come your way. It is bad luck to sing at the table. Refusing a kiss under the mistletoe causes bad luck. For good luck, wear new clothes on Easter. Kind of hard to do when you're poor. Finding a penny heads up brings good luck. Dropping a knife means a man will visit. For a happy marriage, the bride must wear something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. Now here are the biblical versions and laws of superstition. Don't allow one kind of cattle to mix with a different kind of cattle. Don't sow mixed seeds on the same plot. Don't wear different types of clothes at the same time. Don't cut your hair. If anyone has sex with an animal, both that person and the animal must be killed. Don't have sex with a woman on her period, or you will be cut off from your people. Stone to death all wizards, witches, and psychics. There's a few psychics in Hollywood we can get after this. Anyone who has their private parts cut off can't enter into the congregation of the Lord. These are just a few of the many strange laws and scriptures found in the Bible. Human beings were profoundly ignorant to the word as we know it today in terms of their understanding of the natural elements. What caused night to change into day? The darkening of the clouds, a solar eclipse, or thunder were beyond their explanations. Thunder, for example, may have been perceived as God cracking his joints. Rain in many cultures was considered the saliva of God, and the sun, the eye of God. When night came, it was God closing his eyes. Myth and magic and superstition precede religion, and so much of the Bible reflects this derivation. The books of the Old Testament especially are not used for moral guidance. Many preachers even considered it outdated, and understandably so. The information age doesn't look to the industrial age for solving its problems. The industrial age doesn't look to the agricultural age, and the agricultural age doesn't look to the Stone Age. Why then do we continue to use a book dating back to pre-agrarian age to solve modern problems? Principles such as love, respect, patience are ageless. Human characteristics such as anger, jealousy, greed, and lust are also timeless. T.D. Jakes displayed the absurdity of referring to an old book to address a modern issue. Jakes claimed he didn't know how to deal with the AIDS problem in the black community because Paul didn't mention anything about it in the scriptures. Wow. Does the Bible mention anything about teenage pregnancy, single-parent homes, dropping out of high school, drug addiction, sexually explicit music, and weapons of mass destruction? Probably not. But that does not excuse us from choosing not to deal with these critical issues. Believers claim the Bible is stacked with edifying lessons about life which are still relevant today, but can't say why that about most books intended to edify us. On the pages of most self-help books, we can find something of value. Most of what sees as forms of worship or reverence is actually behavior rooted in superstition. There are people that wouldn't dare touch a bite of food without first blessing it or saying grace. The belief is that doing so will prevent poisoning or even choking to death. Many are familiar with the phrase, "You better not say that or do that, or God is going to strike you dead." In 1947, in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, number 38, titled Superstition and the Pigeon, the behavioral scientist B.F. Skinner, in his study of superstition, placed hungry pigeons in a cage attached to a device that issued food for the pigeons at regular intervals without regard to behavior. Skinner discovered that the pigeons began to associate the issuance of food with whatever random behavior they were involved in at the time, and so the pigeons continued to perform these actions. The pigeons actually believed they were influencing the device by engaging in specific behavior prior to receiving the food. The pigeons behaved as if they were a cause and effect relationship between their behavior and the issuance of food. This experiment may have shed light on human behavior. A woman told me about one time she drove her car without having her Bible placed beside her in the passenger seat. She wound up having an accident. After the accident, the woman vowed never, ever to forget her Bible and drive without it in the car again. She was probably never thought to realize how many accidents there are with Bibles in the car, or the incidents which never occur when there are no Bibles present in cars. As stated before, a thin line exists between religion and superstition. Some even say they are one and the same. I say, take Stevie Wonder's advice. When you believe in things that you don't understand, superstition ain't the way. Thank you.
W.E.B. Du Bois lived from 1868 to 1963, 94 years. He was an American sociologist, historian, civil rights activist, Pan-Africanist, author, and editor. He grew up in Massachusetts at a relatively tolerant and integrated community. After graduating from Harvard, when he was the first African American to earn a doctorate, he became a professor of history, sociology, and economics at Atlanta University. In 1909, Du Bois was one of the co-founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. After World War I, he surveyed the experiences of American black soldiers in France and documented widespread bigotry in the United States military. Du Bois was a prolific author. His collection of essays, The Souls of Black Folk, was a seminal work in African American literature, and his 1935 magnum opus, Black Reconstruction in America, challenged the prevailing orthodoxy that blacks were responsible for the failures of the Reconstruction era. He published 3 autobiographies, each of which contains insightful essays on sociology, politics, and history. In his role as editor of the NAACP's journal, The Crisis, he published many influential pieces. The United States Civil Rights Act, embodying many of the reforms for which Du Bois had campaigned his entire life, was enacted a year after his death. The suppression of the African slave trade to the United States of America, 1638 to 1870. In these 315 pages published in 1896, W.E.B. Du Bois presents a comprehensive history of the slave trade in America, from start to finish. Written without emotional hyperbole, the facts alone are enough to chill the blood of any reader. Here are a few excerpts to pique your interest. Du Bois writes, "The study begins with the colonial period, setting forth in brief the attitude of England and more in detail the attitude of the planting, farming, and trading groups of colonies toward the slave trade. It deals with the first concerted effort against the trade and with the further action of the individual states. The important work of the Constitutional Convention follows, together with a history of the trade in that critical period which preceded the Act of 1807. The attempt to suppress the trade from 1807 to 1830 is next recounted. A chapter then deals with the slave trade as an international problem. Finally, the development of the crisis up to the Civil War is studied, together with the steps leading to the final suppression, and a concluding chapter seeks to sum up the results of the investigation. Sir John Hawkins' celebrated voyage took place in 1562, but probably not until 1631 did a regular chartered company undertake to carry on the trade. In 1698, parliamentary interference with the trade began. The Asiento was a treaty between England and Spain by which the latter granted the former a monopoly of the Spanish colonial slave trade. For 30 years, and England engaged to supply the colonies within that time with at least 144,000 slaves at the rate of 4,800 per year. England was also to advance Spain 200,000 crowns with at least 144,000 to pay duty of 33.5 crowns for each slave imported. It is stated that in the 20 years from 1713 to 1733, 16,000 slaves were annually imported into America by the English. That the slave trade was the very life of the colonies had, by 1700, become an almost unquestioned axiom in British practical economics. The colonists themselves declared slaves, quote, the strength and sinews of this Western world, unquote, and the lack of them, the grand obstruction. Here, as the planters abroad, it easily became the settled policy of England to encourage the slave trade. The exact proportion of the slave trade to America can be but approximated, determined from 1680 to 1688. The African Company said 249 ships to Africa shipped there 60,783 Negro slaves, and after losing 14,387 on the Middle Passage, delivered 46,396 to America. The trade increased early in the 18th century. To these figures must be added the unregistered trade of the American and foreigners. It is probable that about 25,000 slaves were brought to America each year between 1698 and 1707. Before the Revolution, the total exportation to America is variously estimated as between 40,000 and 100,000 each year. Bancroft places the total slave population of the continental colonies at 59,000 in 1714, 78,000 in 1727, and 293,000 in 1754. The census of 1790 showed 897 slaves in the United States. In colonies like those of the West Indies and in South Carolina and Georgia, the rapid importation into America of a multitude of savages gave rise to a system of slavery far different from that which the late Civil War abolished. On the other hand, in New England and New York, the Negroes were merely house servants or farm hands and were treated neither better nor worse than servants in general in those days. Between these two extremes, the system of slavery varied from a mild serfdom in Pennsylvania and New Jersey to an aristocratic caste system in Maryland and Virginia. The lesson for Americans? It may be doubted if ever before such political mistakes as the slavery compromises of the Constitutional Convention had such serious results, and yet, by a succession of unexpected accidents, still left the nation in position to work out its destiny. No American can study the connection of slavery with United States history and not devoutly pray that his country may never have a similar social problem to solve until it shows more capacity for such work that it has shown in the past. It is neither profitable nor in accordance with the scientific truth to consider that whatever the constitutional fathers did was right, or that slavery was a plague sent from God and fated to be eliminated in due time. Moreover, it was due to no wisdom and foresight on the part of the fathers that fortuitous circumstances made the result of the recent war what it was, nor was it due to exceptional philanthropy on the part of their descendants that the result included the abolition of slavery. W.E.B. Du Bois.
This piece is written by Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes lived from 1902 to 1967. He was born in Missouri, raised mostly in Kansas. He was an African-American poet, novelist, playwright, columnist, and atheist. I'm going to read a piece that he wrote entitled Salvation. I was saved from sin when I was going on 13, but not really saved. It happened like this. There was a big revival at my Auntie Reed's church. Every night for weeks, there had been much preaching, singing, praying, and shouting. And some very hardened sinners had been brought to Christ. And the membership of the church had grown by leaps and bounds. Then, just before the revival ended, they had held a special meeting for children to bring the young lambs into the fold. My aunt spoke of it for days ahead. That night, I was escorted to the front row and placed on the mourner's bench with all the other young sinners who had not yet been brought to Jesus. My aunt told me that when you were saved, you saw a light, and something happened to you inside. And Jesus came into your life, and God was with you from then on. She said you could see and hear and feel Jesus in your soul, and I believed her. I had heard a great many people say the same thing, and it seemed to me they ought to know. So I sat there calmly in the hot, crowded church, waiting for Jesus to come. The preacher preached a wonderful rhythmic sermon. all moans and shouts, and lonely cries and dire pictures of hell. And then he sang a song about the 99 safe in the fold. But one little lamb was left out in the cold. And then he said, won't you come to Jesus? Young lambs, won't you come? And he held out his arm to all us young sinners there on the mourner's bench. And the little girls cried, and some of them jumped up and they went to Jesus right away. But most of us just sat there. A great many old people came and knelt around us and prayed. Old women with jet black faces and braided hair. Old men with work-gnarled hands. And the church sang a song about the lower lights a-burnin'. Some poor sinners to be saved. And the whole building rocked with prayer and song. Still, I kept waiting to see Jesus. Finally, all the young people had gone to the altar and were saved, but one boy and me. He was a rounder's son named Wesley. Wesley and I were surrounded by sisters and deacons praying. It was very hot in the church and getting late now. Finally, Wesley said to me in a whisper, God damn, I'm tired of sitting here. Let's get up and be saved. So he got up and was saved. Then I was left all alone on the mourner's bench. My aunt came up and knelt at my knees and cried, while prayers and songs swirled all around me and in the little church. The whole congregation prayed for me alone in a mighty wail of moans and voices. And I kept waiting serenely for Jesus. Waiting. But he didn't come. I wanted to see him, but nothing happened to me. Nothing. I wanted something to happen to me, but nothing happened. I heard the songs and the minister saying, why don't you come? My dear child, why don't you come to Jesus? Jesus is waiting for you. He wants you. Why don't you come? Sister Reed, what is this child's name? Langston, my aunt sobbed. Langston, why don't you come? Why don't you come and be saved? Oh, Lord of God and Lamb of God, why don't you come? Now, it was really getting late. And I began to be ashamed of myself, holding everything up so long. I began to wonder what God thought about Wesley, who certainly hadn't seen Jesus either, but who was now sitting proudly on the platform, swinging his knickerbocker legs, grinning down at me, surrounded by deacons and old women on their knees praying. God had not struck Wesley dead for taking his name in vain or for lying in the temple. So I decided that maybe, to save further trouble, I'd better lie too and say that Jesus had come and get up and be saved. So I got up. Suddenly, the whole room broke into a sea of shouting as they saw me rise. Waves of rejoicing swept the place. Women leaped up in the air. My aunt threw her arms around me. The minister shook my hand and led me to the platform. When things quieted down in a hushed silence, punctuated by a few ecstatic amen, all the new young lambs were blessed in the name of God. Then joyous singing filled the room. That night, for the last time in my life but one, for I was a big boy of 12 years old, I cried. I cried in bed alone and couldn't stop. I buried my head under the quilts, but my aunt heard me. She woke up and told my uncle I was crying because the Holy Ghost had come into my life and because I had seen Jesus. But I was really crying because I couldn't bear to tell her that I had lied, that I had deceived everybody in the church, that I hadn't seen Jesus, and that now I didn't believe there was a Jesus anymore, since he didn't come to help me.
This last short piece about Frederick Douglass. For this selection, I must first introduce you to another great American icon. One of his descendants is in the audience today. Robert Greene Ingersoll, a white American, lived from 1833 to 1899. He was a lawyer, a Civil War veteran. His ashes are buried at Arlington National Cemetery. He was a political leader and one of the most famous orators of the latter part of the 19th century, often speaking to crowds of 50,000 listeners. At the height of Ingersoll's fame, audiences would pay $1 or more to hear him speak, which was a giant sum for that time. He was known as the great agnostic. I think today he would call himself an atheist. Ingersoll's writings and speeches comprise 13 volumes, of which Atheists United owns a full set. Although largely forgotten during the 20th century, Ingersoll is now gaining deserved recognition among all atheists and freethinkers and is considered one of the inspirational stalwarts of the current atheist free thought movement. Much of his life was spent with his wife Eva and their 2 daughters in Peoria, Illinois. Here is what Frederick Douglass said about Ingersoll in Douglass's autobiography, The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. I delivered a lecture in Elmwood, Illinois, 20 miles from Peoria. My next appointment was on Monday night, and in order to reach it in time, it was necessary to go to Peoria the night previous so as to take an early morning train. As we walked to the station, I said to my friend, Mr. Brown, I'm going to Peoria with a real dread of the place. I expect to be compelled to walk the streets of that city all night to keep from freezing. I told him the last time I was there, I could obtain no shelter at any hotel, and I fear that I shall meet a similar fate tonight. Mr. Brown said, I know a man in Peoria, should the hotels be closed against you there, who would gladly open his doors to you in any hour of the night and in any weather. Robert G. Ingersoll. Fortunately, I had no occasion for disturbing him or his family. I found quarters for the night at the best hotel. In the morning, I resolved to know more about this now famous and noted infidel. Fortunately, I had no occasion for disturbing him or his family, but I did give him an early call. Mr. Ingersoll was at home, and if I have ever met a man with real living human sunshine in his face and honest manly kindness in his voice, I met one who possessed these qualities that morning. I received a welcome from Mr. Ingersoll and his family which I can never forget or fail to appreciate. Perhaps there were Christian ministers and Christian families in Peoria at that time by whom I might have been received in the same gracious manner. In charity, I am bound to say that there probably were such ministers and such families. But I am equally bound to say that in my previous visits to that place, I'd failed to find them. Thank you.
One more time for Kiana Watkins. Stand up. Roberta West. Richard McNally. And Steve Hill. We want to give our best wishes to Steve Hill. He's actually running for District 21 State Senate. We have no official stance, but we just want to wish him the best. Okay, that concludes our ceremony for today. There are donuts and coffee outside. Feel free to hang out. Thank you.